I'm not having luck today. I'm not having any luck today. Okay, so welcome everybody to our live broadcast for the second time. So just quickly, if you want to participate on any of the live channels, so that's on the MyRehab Helper profile, the MyRehab or the ARC Facebook page, or the Duly Diagnosed YouTube channel. The link is in the comments. You can just click on that link and you can hop on and you can participate either by a video and audio or just by audio. If you want to post comments and ask questions, you're welcome to do that. And we'll post them up on the screen and see if we can answer them. Alternatively, if you're watching from the MyRehab Cafe Facebook group, please know that for the first 10 to 20 minutes, we are going to be on the public channels. And so just bear that in mind. If you want a higher degree of anonymity or confidentiality, please wait until we switch over exclusively to the MyRehab Cafe group. So today we have Lorio again for the second time. Welcome. Thank you
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to participate in this. So today we are discussing interpersonal dynamics in relationships and recovery, and we're talking about forming stable relationships. So, and we were going.
Yes, that's correct.
We started going through this worksheet. So, I'm going to start from the top. Okay. So the ways of thinking that form healthy relationships promote healthy living in general. The stress of a troubled relationship is a common relapse trigger, but a good relationship supports recovery under other kinds of stress. Forming stable relationships is a valuable life skill. Our closest relationships can be the most challenging. We may find ourselves in unhappy situations over and over, knowing something's wrong, but not how to get it right. The stress of those problems may lead to people in addiction, and others may lead people into addiction and other self-destructive actions. What would you say are key qualities of healthy and unhealthy relationships? Lorio, I'm going to hand that one over to you. I think you were on a roll. The last one.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think a lot of the previous videos that we've made have touched on healthy versus unhealthy relationships. I think some key characteristic traits looking at healthy versus unhealthy relationships is probably first and foremost, I would say, is just some level of respect. Is that both parties genuinely respect one another, be that in their way of communicating or the decisions that they make that can affect one another. In addition, like I said, healthy boundaries can be a good trait that falls under healthy relationships, where enmeshment can be a trait of unhealthy relationships. Attentive listening can be a good trait for a healthy relationship versus constant interruption and bulldozing or gaslighting being probably unhealthy
I'm going to interrupt you on that note.
No problem.
So I've got ADD, right? Or ADHD, and it's weird because you mentioned attentive listening, and I often have to remind my wife when she's talking to me that I literally have an attention deficit problem, because I tend to drift off and sort of like stare blankly into space and just sort of nod my head, and yeah, that does cause some degree of conflict, but it's I suppose a lot of people would relate, ADHD or not, to that.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you consider, and as I've said before, I'm one of 4, technically 5 children. So my mom, we would be around the dinner table and we'd be in, like knee deep into a good story. And then all of a sudden she'll get up and she'll go fetch something, or she'll call somebody, or she'll clean something. And then I'd say, but Mom, I'm in the middle of my sentence. But then I also need to consider she has 5 kids. So, for her to sit down, and as you know yourself, I can talk quite a lot and for a long period of time. So for her to sustain that level of attention for my intricate, in detail story might not be realistic, So I've learned over the years to understand that she's not doing it because she's not interested in the story, or I should either keep my stories a bit shorter or invite a bit more feedback, or otherwise, like I said, consider, it's around the dinner table, there's 5 or 10 other people that she needs to accommodate and host. So I think it is important to understand, again, your audience or who you're talking to.
So that's crazy. This morning, my wife actually said she was telling me the story, and I drifted off into space and kind of like was staring blankly and nodding, and I stopped. I heard something and I stopped. I said, "Sorry, could you just start again?" And she laughed, which is cool. And I said, "Geez, I'm really sorry." And she was like, "No, listen, man, I've been with you for 12 years. I get it."
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good indicator of a healthy relationship, is where we understand that it's not necessarily the other person trying to be an asshole or difficult or make, so another thing that happened, so I'm really grumpy in the morning, say, like, it's bad, it's like, and I went downstairs and it's this bloody load shedding, and I was upset, and I was standing downstairs and she came up to me and I like kind of like almost scowled at her, like gave her this hectic look, and I hadn't opened my mouth or said anything to anybody, and I went back upstairs and she sent me this message. She was like, "That was very rude. Like, you could have at least said good morning." And I immediately went downstairs and apologized profusely because, and that's, again, I could have argued with her and said, "Leave me alone. It's too early for this shit." And you know what I mean? Anyway, yeah. So yes, I relate to what you're saying a lot, eh? Unhealthy traits, Lorio. You were saying enmeshment.
Yes, enmeshment. I think some of those communication styles we looked at last week, sarcasm, very aggressive ways of communicating, being passive aggressive, even being dishonest, being self-involved or selfish, not really considering the impact of your decisions on your partner or on the other person. I think there's more pathological type of traits, but I mean, the general pitfalls that people fall into is those type of things, blame shifting as well. So I think people would kind of categorize it in general that they constantly feel in some way manipulated by the person. And I think the most probably general term that people would use is they would say, "I feel like I need to walk on eggshells," which means that the person's unpredictable in their way of responding. And I think that can be quite draining in a relationship if you're not sure, when you're allowed. Even some patients will tell me they use the word allowed when they don't necessarily know when they're allowed to say certain things or how to approach, because they don't necessarily know what the person's reaction is going to be. So I think that unpredictable nature can be.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening with my camera now again.
Yeah,
come back.
Come and take a look at that setting. I don't know what's going on there, but so I wanted to find. It just brought to mind. Okay, I want to read this quickly because I think this is so important, and I think this is why it's important to have an understanding of. We often talk about the big 5 character traits, right? Which is, I'm going to try to go through this. So it's agreeableness, which is made up of compassion and politeness; conscientiousness, which is made up of industriousness and orderliness; extroversion, which is made up of enthusiasm and assertiveness; neuroticism, which is made up of withdrawal and volatility; openness to experience, which is openness and intellect. And what you're talking about there, agreeableness. So people that are very high in agreeableness. So agreeableness, which is the primary dimension of interpersonal interaction in the big 5 personality trait scientific model. Agreeableness has 2 aspects, compassion and politeness, which will be explained separately. Agreeableness is a very complex trait marked with marked positive and negative elements all along its distribution. Because of this, higher scores and lower scores need to be explained at the same time. People high in agreeableness are nice, compliant, nurturing, kind, naively trusting, and conciliatory. However, because of their tendency to avoid conflict, they often dissemble and hide what they think. People low in agreeableness are not so nice, stubborn, dominant, harsh, skeptical, competitive, and in the extreme, even predatory. However, they tend to be straightforward, even blunt, so you know where they stand. People with exceptionally high levels of agreeableness are seen by others as extremely cooperative, warm, and considerate. I just want to find the parts. Okay, they're remarkably likely to look for and even sometimes see the best in others, and are unusually interpersonally tolerant. They cannot stand seeing someone's feelings get hurt, and they're extremely concerned about the emotional state of others, radically preferring peace and harmony. They tend exceptionally towards submissiveness rather than dominance, particularly, okay. People with exceptionally high levels of agreeableness are remarkably forgiving, accepting, flexible, gentle, and patient. I just want to find the part. They're not very good at bargaining for themselves or negotiating for more recognition or power. They're likely to have lower salaries and earn less money in consequence. All of this can lead to intense resentment and hidden anger, particularly amongst those who are also high in neuroticism. So the reason I think that's so interesting, Lario, is because, you mentioned interpersonal relationships, and if you are somebody that's very high in agreeableness, you're not necessarily going to negotiate on your own behalf. You're going to negotiate on the behalf of others more readily than you are on your own behalf, right?
Yes.
And you aren't necessarily going to be forthcoming when it comes to resentments that you might have, right? Or issues that you might have. So, for example, if my wife was very high in agreeableness, she might not have sent me that message. She might have been like, "Oh, he's just grumpy in the mornings. I'm gonna let it slide." And you let that slide for enough mornings, it's gonna turn into a resentment, right, for her. So in a lot of ways, psychotherapy can be a very powerful tool when it comes to assertiveness training for people that are high in agreeableness, right?
100%, Brian, 100%. And I think it's so important because I think if we work, as we go through the worksheet, that's one thing they focus on a lot, is that you are kind of, like you say, you're accommodating, but you're overly accommodating to somebody else's needs or wants, that you often neglect your own. And as you said, that can definitely come out in resentment. And I think it's often those people that then become passive aggressive and they project that anger and that resentment on somebody else, not the target of their anger, but somebody else that they perceive to be maybe a bit more vulnerable or a bit more submissive. So it's kind of a vicious cycle, There's a series that I used to watch, How I Met Your Mother, which I know probably a lot of people have watched as well, where one of the characters explains the chain of screaming, and where he says that's what corporate America is built on, is just displacing anger from one person onto the next. So the CEO craps out the manager, and the manager throws it onto the people they're supervising, and the worker goes and screams at his wife, and the wife goes and screams at the kids, and the kids go and scream at their kindergarten teacher, who is the boss's wife. So he explains so nicely the vicious cycle and how we've been kind of trained to displace a lot of that resentment and anger onto people who don't deserve it, or even towards ourselves.
Yeah. So, but I think in particular, I think that's a good point. I think projecting things isn't a helpful trait for a healthy relationship on all fronts necessarily. But again, I really have to drive the point home that I think it's so important for people to understand themselves and know, where they fall on that spectrum of agreeableness. So, so that, being a highly disagreeable person, might need to rein in the aggressive, like you mentioned, the aggressive communication style, right? Or being a very highly agreeable person, you might need to sort of state your case a little bit more often and be a bit more assertive about your wants and your needs, instead of sort of letting everything slide, because I think that's a recipe for just long-term resentment. So I think a good place to start in terms of all of this is, understanding your personality traits. Let's take a look at another question. Unhappy relationships are often like addictions to drugs or such behaviors as gambling, overwork, overspending, and so on. Here are some traits of addictive relationships. For each, please give an example of any experiences you've had that fit this pattern. A, rapid, high-intensity involvement. We may call it love at first sight, but it's usually lust at first sight. As with drugs, we see instant gratification from intense experiences. I've got a perfect example for that. At times, we've seen patients come into the center, and they're there for a day or two, and they fall blindly in love with this random person that they've just met, that's been in the treatment center, and they sort of have these grand ideas about running off into the sunset and living happily ever after, right? Rapid, high intensity involvement. I think that's a good example, Laria.
100%. I wanted to say exactly the same thing. Or even shortly after rehab, in AA or in A groups or so, they often also meet other people, So I think that's unfortunately very high risk at the end of the day. But a lot of the patients have told me it's almost as if it's also some form of a forbidden fruit, especially because that's one of the rules that we outline, is to say that, we don't encourage any exclusive type of relationships. It's almost as soon as you put that barrier in or that boundary in, it's again something to push the envelope or to push the boundary. So it ignites that feeling. And as we've said before, with addiction, it's actually that dopamine doesn't really get released as much, or you don't get addicted to the dopamine that gets released when you're high or drunk. It's in the anticipation of getting the drug or the substance that you're already releasing a lot of dopamine, So lots of patients would say it's even in the chase of the person, it's in flirting with the person or pursuing the person, and then getting some form of a response, a positive response, then. But that Nikki also wears off at some point. But it's quite prevalent how many people seem to latch onto their next drug, which then becomes a person. Or even they might have a partner at home, which, they've kind of, before coming into rehab, they might have neglected the person a lot, or pushed the person away or disconnected from the person, and now suddenly they want to make that person the alpha and omega of their of their focus, and they want kind of the relationship to go back to the honeymoon phase, which isn't always realistic. And again, it's kind of like replacing or substituting the substance now with a relationship, be it a new one or a previous one.
Cool. So look, our time's up on the public channels. I just want to encourage anybody that's watching, if you are interested in doing a personality test that's got a very high level of a detailed explanation in terms of the results that it kicks out, go to a website called understandmyself.com. You can sort of subscribe, and it's like I think it's $11 or something. I don't know how much that is in rands, but it's $11, and you can do the self-assessment, and you can actually, if you have a partner, they can do the self-assessment, and you can sort of there's a button you can click, and it'll give you comparative answers and say how it is that you guys function in terms of a relationship based on the results, which I think is awesome. I think that's really a really cool tool. Check that out. It's understandmyself.com. With that, I'm going to switch over to, I'm not going to do the intermission thing. I'm going to play a video that explains what the MyRehab Cafe is. And then I'm going to switch over to the MyRehab Cafe group. So I'll see you on the other side, Laria.
Yeah.
Cheers, everyone on the public channels. Thank you for watching. Cool.
What's up, guys? MyRehab Helper here. I want to tell you about a refreshing approach to a process of self-discovery for anyone that's just left a rehab program for substance abuse issues, or for anyone wanting to engage with a community of others on a journey of self-discovery. The MyRehab Cafe initiative is a thriving community focused on sobriety. You'll find that this group is thriving and full of conversations and discussion on what is working for those who are staying sober. Some members have used 12-step programs and others have never stepped foot into a meeting, but they all have one thing in common: they are serious about quitting drinking and leading a better life. New members often express how friendly, open and welcoming the community feels, even more than they expected. We achieve this by fostering a community built on trust and fairness, with policies in place and enforce a no jerks allowed policy. We will make a point of getting you plugged in and connected with the community, and all this with the understanding that you want to be here and the expectation that you will put in the effort and participate in the group. Members gain access to recovery resources like worksheets, online lectures, online Q&A sessions, online discussion forums, online workshops, linking with an accountability partner and the MyRehab podcast. In MyRehab Cafe, you'll get advice and tips from members who have been sober for years, from those who have been where you are. They have a tremendous amount of experience to share, but so do you. We have chosen to grow this group slowly, paying attention to who may be a good fit and who may not be. This group may not be for everyone, and that's okay. Those who realize it's not about what you get from the community, but what you can give, are the ones who we see being the most successful. Those who ask questions, share with others, attend webinars, and get out of their comfort zones are the ones who benefit the most from this private online community. Thanks for listening, guys. MyRehab Helper.